coming to you with my very first recipe on this channel. I'm super excited about it, so I hope you guys stick with me through all of my recipes. I am a college student, so a lot of the things that I may bake is probably going to be something that you can easily make at home yourself. I don't have all the nice baking tools that somebody who professionally bakes might have, or has a little bit more money than a college student. But I do have some things, and most of my recipes are made with things that you can somewhat be found around your house or easy to get at the store. So yeah, I hope you guys can follow along. I don't want to talk too much, I just want to get right into it, so let's go. So today we're going to be making pumpkin bread, and this pumpkin bread's a little bit different. It's not going to be the usual pumpkin bread that you see and think of, where it's made in a little loaf pan. It's very sweet, it's got some nuts in it, it's a little cinnamon. Today we're going to be making a no-knead pumpkin bread with my beautiful Dutch oven over there in the back. So let's get started. So for this recipe we only need 6 things. I'm going to show them to you as I go. Super simple. The first one is salt. I like to use sea salt for almost everything. That's why I have this giant one from Whole Foods. We need active dry yeast. Hopefully you can find this in stores. Flour, of which I have in a bag because I had to steal a little bit from my parents. Pumpkin puree. We only need about half a cup, so there's going to be a lot left of this. I recommend making pumpkin cookies, of which I will upload a video about that later. And the rest, spices. So I have cinnamon, gingerbread spice, nutmeg, and cloves. These are just the spices that I chose for this recipe. You can use pumpkin pie spice if you like. Otherwise, add in your own spices as you wish. The first thing we're gonna do is add almost all of our ingredients together and then just knead it a little bit so that we have a dough that forms. Since this is a no-knead bread, you only need to knead it until it just all comes together, and then you let it rise for 12 to 16 hours overnight, however long you want, and then it bakes. Okay, so I have all my ingredients here. I have a cup and a tablespoon of warm water. I have our pumpkin puree, our spices, and the salt, which you can't really see. I have my dry yeast, my flour, a spoon to mix because I don't always like to mix with my hand, and a tea towel for when we let it rise. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're going to mix the pumpkin puree with the water. It's gonna be probably a little funky for a bit. And there we are. I'm gonna mix this until it's a little less chunky than it is. I like to use a spoon because this is fine to use a whisk at first, but once we start adding flour and it gets nice and thick, it's going to probably mess up your whisk. Okay, so that's pretty uniform. So this is a super easy part. We're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of active dry yeast into here. The best thing about no-knead bread is that you don't have to add any sugar. The yeast just works overnight for a really long time. And we're going to add a little bit of salt. I just like kind of going for it. You don't need that much salt. We don't want a very salty bread. And then we're going to add a little bit of spice. So I got here a little bit of cinnamon. A little bit of nutmeg. You can add more or less depending on how much you like. Here we have a little bit of gingerbread. And last but not least, a little bit of cloves. You can add as much as you like, as little as you like. So give this a little mix. Okay, now that all our spices in there, we're going to add our flour. I'm going to add a little bit at a time. I don't want to get too much on there at once or it's gonna get just clumps of flour. You could sift it, but sifting takes a lot more time and it doesn't really alter it as long as you just do a little bit at a time. So we're using 3 cups of flour. If you're following along, you might find that your dough ends up being a little bit sticky once you've added all of the flour in. That's absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about that. The dough is meant to be a little bit sticky. Get a little bit of an arm workout doing this. Okay, so we have a nice sticky ball here, which is perfect. So what we're going to do, so we don't need to knead this at all because the yeast is going to do its work overnight. So all we're going to do is we are going to cover this with a tea towel, a clean tea towel, and we're going to let it rise overnight, and then in the morning we'll be ready to bake. Now that we have our dough formed, all we have to do is let it rise overnight, and then we can go ahead and bake it in the morning. See you guys tomorrow. Welcome back everyone, it's a new day and today we are going to be finishing our pumpkin bread. So here I have my risen pumpkin bread, which if you can see has grown a lot in size and filled up the entire bowl. So I'm going to show you how we're going to form that into a loaf. I'm going to use my Dutch oven to bake it, but if you don't have a Dutch oven, what you can do is you can fold it into a loaf and then you can put it on a baking pan and put a little bit of water inside your oven in a different loaf pan to keep it hydrated, and then bake it for somewhat the same amount of time that I would in the Dutch oven. First I'm going to show you how to put it into a loaf. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to scrape our dough from the side of the bowl. I recommend starting with a little bit of flour on your hands so that it doesn't quite stick to you, and a little bit on your work surface. So we're going to scrape down the sides of the bowl. It's going to be sticky. Don't worry about that. Just going to work our way around. Might need a little more flour. You're going to tuck the sides where the folds are underneath the dough. See how we have a little ball here now? Going to flour this a little bit. So now that we have a little round dough with a little flour on top, we're going to place our tea towel, again, back over it. So this is going to rise for about an hour and a half. And then after that, we're going to put it in the oven. Now that we have our loaf form, we're going to let it rise for about an hour to an hour and a half, and then we'll be ready to put it in the oven. You're going to want to preheat your oven to 425 degrees. If you're using a Dutch oven, place the Dutch oven inside the oven to preheat along with it. If you don't have a Dutch oven, place a loaf pan with a little bit of water in it, also inside the oven, and allow that to preheat. So it's been an hour and a half, so now we can uncover our dough. So we have a nice little loaf here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my Dutch oven and I'm going to carefully place this in there, cut a little strip on the side so it has room to grow, and then we will bake it for 30 minutes with the Dutch oven covered, and then after 30 minutes, we will take the top off and let it bake for another 20 minutes so that it can get a nice crust. If you don't have a Dutch oven and you're just baking it on a pan, carefully place the dough onto a pan, and then you will bake for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you will turn it around and let it bake for another 20 minutes so that it cooks evenly. And here we are, a freshly baked pumpkin bread loaf. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me nearly burn myself taking it out of my Dutch oven. And I'm gonna let it cool off a bit and then we can cut it. This smells absolutely phenomenal, so I'm super excited to dig in. We got a nice, lovely, soft center and a nice, crusty outside. And there we have it, pumpkin bread. I hope you guys enjoyed this recipe. I hope that you continue to watch my videos, and please follow me on Instagram at ThePhysicsBaker for some pictures of our wonderful creations together.